Greater Good Podcast. My name's Brian. I'm the host, content creator, broadcasting, netcasting, podcasting from Kansas City, Missouri. A little bit about me, born and raised here, lived all over the country, LA, Chicago, Colorado, Phoenix, St. Louis, back in KC since 2010, so 15 years. Irish Catholic, culturally Catholic now, non-practicing Catholic, attorney by trade, not by spirit, husband, father, coach, podcaster now. Never really thought I'd say that, but yeah, podcaster. What's in a name? Greater Good Podcast. What is the Greater Good Podcast? Or why did I name it the Greater Good Podcast? Well, trying to set the tone in opposition to lesser evil thinking, particularly in the political electoral context. 3 presidential cycles, 5 presidential cycles, 10 presidential cycles, 20 presidential cycles. How long have we been operating under the ethos of 2 corporatist parties trying to convince us, well, yeah, our party's candidate isn't the best, but the other party's candidate, way worse. So, got to vote for our guy or gal, particularly recently. Which is not to say that I've never been inspired by a candidate. I've been inspired by a couple candidates, but most recently, the candidate who inspired me was railroaded twice by his party, and then has recently revealed himself to be incapable of describing what's happening in Israel, or what Israel is doing, what's happening in Gaza. That's genocide. Prior to that, I was inspired by a candidate who ran a very progressive campaign, ostensibly, and became the first president of a particular racial designation, and then has subsequently revealed himself to be an egomaniacal profiteer on celebrity. So what's in a name? Greater Good Podcast. Well, definitely the antithesis and hopefully the antidote to lesser evil electoral operating, thinking. But in a larger scope, the greater good is also an operating ethos for thinking about policy, thinking about ideas, creating ideas, analyzing, debating ideas. In the political context, in the social context, in the spiritual context. What is the greater good? What is the greater good for all of us? For so long in this country, arguably since its foundation, we've operated in a capitalist system. And a capitalist system forces upon us the notion of competition. I've got to get mine, because if I don't get mine, you're going to get mine. Zero-sum game. I get mine first, and then if there's anything left for anyone else, great. That's not for the greater good, that's for the personal good, the individual good. Let's focus on the common good. Another quick digression. We talk about the greater good politically, socially, culturally, philosophically. There's also a greatest good, in my opinion. I will go into that in part 2 of the podcast. But suffice to say that what ultimately would be the greatest good in the Aristotelian sense, in the sense of Hannah Arendt's concept of action in the tripartite public sphere of labor, work, and action, the greatest good is grassroots, functional democracy. One person, one vote, debate in the open square among equals and engaged citizens. And I think I've covered everything I want to say in that regard. So now let's switch gears to who's in the audience. I've already introduced myself. I think it makes sense to say what I'm hoping for in this audience. Well, of course, I primarily want people like myself because it's easier to talk to oneself ostensibly than to anyone else. I mean, hell, that's what I'm doing right now. And yet, also want to talk to people who are unlike me. And obviously, I haven't said much about me beyond basic demographics yet. You're probably getting a sense of my politics and the politics of the podcast. But I mean, to continue the answer the question of who I want in the audience. I want people who are primarily interested and engaged in talking about politics, who want to understand policy, who want to debate good ideas, who want to be open to being open. You know, I don't want closed-minded people. I want people who want the discussion, even if that discussion from their perspective launches or is based in a different political persuasion. We have to be able to talk to the people that with whom we don't agree. So I want to talk to people who don't immediately agree with my politics, as well as, of course, people who might already agree with my politics. A quick digression in the type of person that I don't want to be attracted to this podcast, or to whom this podcast hopefully will not appeal, and that is assholes. No assholes. In a future episode, we'll take a deep dive into a book by professor and philosopher Aaron James called Assholes, a Theory. Perhaps you've heard of it. If you haven't, check it out. It was published in 2010. It's an excellent, and short and accessible read. An asshole is a person who immunizes oneself against any kind of a valid claim of bad behavior as a consequence of a deeply seated sense of entitlement. And the purpose of the book, or the thrust of the book, is to define what is asshole behavior. And then as a result of having a sense for what makes an asshole, how to manage that in yourself, that instinct to assholery in oneself, and then of course how to manage it in the 21st century America, which tends to reward that type of behavior. And certainly in many cases, particularly in the sociopaths who predominantly lead Fortune 500 companies, as well as politicians, demagogues, celebrities, athletes, a lot of white dudes with intergenerational wealth who've been told that they're the directors of society. They're the only people historically who've been able to vote, who've directed the vote, who've received the vote, etc. So, no assholes. This is a no assholes podcast. Two more points. One, I want people, if you're open to being open, then presumably you're open to challenging your own belief system. I want people who want to challenge their own belief system. One of the fundamental beliefs that I carry and under which I operate is I believe I'm attributing this correctly, the Socratic notion of the unexamined life is not worth living. I mean, you can extrapolate that outwards. The unexamined policy isn't worth living. The unexamined belief system isn't worth perpetuating. The unexamined fear isn't worth suffering, etc. I want people who want to examine themselves, their ideas, their world, starting internally, moving in concentric circles externally, outwardly. I also want people who recognize what I think is the most fundamental truth of our species, which is that we're all in this together. No man is an island unto itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the whole. We're not meant to be isolated. We're not meant to compete. We're not meant to compete. That's a fallacy of an economic system that has served us, quote unquote, well, but is based in the notion that you have to get yours. Zero sum. If you don't get yours, someone else is going to get yours. The rising tide lifts all boats has never worked. It's never been accurate. It's always been fallacious. And I want people who recognize that. Not every boat is the same, yet we're all on the sea together. And ultimately, we succeed together and we fail together. So I've introduced myself and answered two questions. What's in the name of the podcast, and who's in the audience? Let's move on to what I consider to be the cornerstones of the podcast itself. Okay, first and foremost, this podcast will never require payment to access any content, never. I'm not doing this for profit, personal gain. Your time will never be commodified, your attention will never be commodified. The podcast will always and forever be free and accessible to all, assuming that I don't say something that gets me deplatformed, like genocide is happening in Gaza. Podcast will be free, accessible, always. Okay, that's the primary cornerstone of the podcast. All right, cornerstone 2 of the podcast. And the plan is to have 2 episodes a week. One will be a deep dive into a book, such as Assholes of Theory. The first 2 books that I plan to cover are The Anatomy of Power by John Kenneth Galbraith, which is his analysis of power dynamics in society in a tripartite system. And then the second book, early on, that I plan to cover is a sociological thesis called The Spirit Level by Kate Willett. Co-authors, the last name is Wilkinson. I think his name is Tom, first name is Tom. They're both British sociologists, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in part 2 of the introduction. So 2 episodes, hopefully a week. We'll see how this goes. Of course, I have a full-time job, husband, father, coach, politically active human, volunteer. So it might take a while to get into a rhythm to get 2 episodes published per week, but that's the goal. Cornerstone 3 of the podcast. And speaking again to the greater good as an operating ethos, so much of what you see online or hear in podcasts or read about through Substack or Medium, whatever, is reactive. It's reactive to the moment. And of course, it's reactive in a Trump administration and to a certain extent across, quote unquote, across the aisle, the fictional aisle that exists between 2 corporate parties who serve the same Wall Street moneyed interest masters. So much of our media landscape is reactive because reaction is emotional and it drives engagement in a commodified attentional economy, right? So that's not the point. That's not what I'm trying to do here. I want the podcast to be proactive, more proactive than reactive. Of course, there will be events that are of such gravity that they need to be addressed, but I'm not gonna, I am avoiding like the plague this podcast YouTube model in which people just grab headlines and comment on them, and, which is not to say that that's not valuable. I certainly subscribe to plenty of podcasts that are essentially news-oriented podcasts that react to events in the world and editorialize. But that's not the point of this podcast. I want to be forward-thinking. I want to be more proactive and less reactive. I want to present ideas that are more or less timeless, or at least more timeless than the capricious and transitory bullshit that particularly corporate media just endlessly throws at us. So, more proactive, less reactive. Our fourth cornerstone is the combination of personality, spirituality, character, and emotion. So I want the podcast to be calm, routine, a safe harbor, or a respite from the chaos. Perfect example of a good podcast that I follow. I listen to Brianna Joy Gray's Bad Faith podcast, of course. So deep dives into interesting subjects, interesting ideas by normal people. Okay, so that's part one of the fourth and final cornerstone. Calm, rational, orderly. I'm not trying to get people whipped up here into a frenzy. But having said that, I also do want it to be emotional, and by emotional I mean all of the emotions. I am an Aries sun. Inside my chest beats a heart with the fire of 1,000 suns. I can scream at a moment's notice. I can laugh at a moment's notice. I can cry at a moment's notice, and I don't mind that. In fact, it's the best of me. I want it to be authentic. I'm not going to shy away from being angry, being sad, being apprehensive, being joyous, being silly, being cringy at times, being human. That's the point. We're all humans. None of us is perfect. There's going to be no facade, no veneer of perfection. Although, as a Taurus rising sign and a Taurus moon, I certainly would like to be ordered and perfect and never have to admit that I'm often a jackass and emotional. But hey, that's one of the joys of being human. And I've alluded to this, but I also want to make sure that this is highlighted. I want this podcast to be fun. I want it to be fun. I do believe that we're going through a revolutionary turn in this country. I do believe that. One of the books I want to dive deeply into is Neil Howe and William Strauss's 1997, The Fourth Turning. It's one of the books, probably the first book that really dramatically changed my understanding of society and how it progresses forward, its rhythms. And as a result, we're in a fourth turning. If you understand the theory, the philosophy, and you agree with it, or you at least believe it has merit, I do believe we're in a revolutionary turn. All of that, though, is to say that revolutionary turn doesn't mean that our lives still can't be joyous and beautiful. We have to hold on to that. We have to be able to recognize that if we're always and only ever angry and fighting and can't stop to say that as humans we can, and here I go getting emotional, as humans we can also be loving and joyous and grateful for the opportunity to be alive on this planet at this moment, then what the hell's the point? Truly, what is the point of living if you can't at some point, at some moment, even in the darkest time, even when you're on the precipice of the void, laugh, cry, dance, hug, make love. So, as a consequence, or as a result of that, and operating under that ethos, every closing component of this podcast is going to have something like the old moment of Zen, although it's going to be more explicitly silly, or something that I think is just, frankly, hilarious. There's one one TikTok creator that I follow who I think is just a genius. So you're going to see a lot of his videos in particular. But I'll also welcome suggestions for other content that is meant to be joyous and fun and silly and satirical and remind us that we are still human and we have to see the sun sometimes. We can't always be in the clouds. We can't always be in the darkness. We have to be joyous. We have to be hopeful. And those feelings don't negate or contradict or invalidate the anger, the frustration, the righteousness that we also feel. Now let's move on to politics. If it's not already obvious, I'm very far to the left. I just joined the Green Party last November because why the fuck not? It's the only party that acknowledges that what's happening in Gaza is genocide. At some future point, I'm going to do a deep dive into my wandering, itinerant, oftentimes wayward and delusional trek through small d democratic politics. How the grandson of a staunch yellow dog Democrat with a bronze bust of JFK in his home when I was a child finally said, I can't do it. I can't do it with the Democratic Party anymore. It's already, of course, it's already obvious. I've already made very clear allusions, if not outright, just now said that the final straw was the party's inability to acknowledge genocide, much less fucking enable it. But I've also alluded to supporting Bernie and him getting railroaded and having so many things like that open my eyes. But I'll admit, it's been a journey. I held on for dear life, and finally just realized, what am I doing? Like, there's no reason to stick with this party anymore. But I do still believe in political parties, which is why I joined the Green Party. You might not like political parties. You can rightly say the Green Party doesn't have any power, dude. So what gives? Well, you're not wrong to dislike political parties as they're currently constructed, and you're not wrong to say that the Green Party doesn't really have any power, outside of a not insubstantial bully pulpit in the form of frequently Jill Stein, Butch Ware now, and various, podcasters on the left, specifically Brianna Joy Gray. One of the reasons for addressing and starting with Galbraith's Anatomy of Power is he talks about the three different sources of power, one of which is being organizational power. Unless you have an inordinate amount, an exorbitant, a disgusting amount of wealth, and/or are the type of human person that is so overwhelmingly charismatic that you can immediately change anyone's mind or influence anyone to do whatever you want, and often the case you're going to need that money or that platform to do so, your only chance for aggregating and then utilizing power in a political sense, in a cultural sense, in a sociological sense, is organizational. So that's essentially why I'm here at the Green Party. And again, we'll go into a deeper dive in the episode on Galbraith's Anatomy of Power. So the camera died. Technical difficulties. I did not have it charged up enough to capture the remaining 4 to 6 minutes of commentary on the Green Party and beyond. But that's a good thing, because it provides a clean break for episode 1, or for part one of the Greater Good Podcast introduction. So part two, I'm recording now, not this moment, but in progress. And I expect to have it posted within a couple days. It might already be posted by the time you watch this, so take a look at that. That will involve the more organized and thorough and deeper dive into my thoughts on Green Party politics, and why I became a Green Party member, maybe a little deeper dive into that as well. It will also include something of a expected production schedule, at least with respect to topics and hopefully interviews scheduled, so that you can look forward to future content. And then finally, a Q&A with myself, because I asked myself questions that if I were you, I would want to know of me. And that's about it. Maybe a little surprise in there too. So thank you for watching episode 1, part 1, introduction to the Greater Good Podcast. And I hope to have you as an audience member for part 2 and beyond. Thanks.